Killer Innovations Podcast for Sunday, April 30th, 2006. Show number 53. Coming to you from Sunnyvale, California. Welcome to this week's Killer Innovations Podcast. I'm your host, Phil McKinney. Before we get started, please keep in mind that the information and opinions expressed in this podcast are mine and mine alone, and do not necessarily reflect those of my past, current, or future employers. Wow, 2 shows in a row. I guess I'm trying to get back on track here after having a couple of missed weeks here. However, I'm about ready to start a crazy time. I have 2 of my kids are graduating from college, one with a bachelor's and one with their master's, and my oldest daughter's wedding, all in the month of May. So the result is I may miss a few shows, but don't worry, I'm not going anywhere, but just given the craziness of graduations and weddings, I may just miss a few shows. Also, for those of you who may have been trying to get to the blog this weekend, I got a call from the ISP hosting company that hosts the Killer Innovations blog site, and the Killer Innovations URL has been hit with spam pingbacks. So I'm being forced to do an upgrade to a new version of the blogging software. However, the upgrade is not going well. The pages are up. You can still get to the site to the past information. However, I am unable to post new items. So you will be able to listen to this podcast, but if you go to the site right away, you may or may not be able to see the show notes. So please hang in there. Hopefully in the next day or two, we'll have it all backing up. But this does not impact the podcast feeds. You'll continue to receive the podcast. I just have to get through this upgrade, and then I can turn back on features such as being able to post new topics. So please send feedback. You can email me at podcast@killerinnovations.com. You can leave messages on the voicemail feedback line at 703-636-4460, or you can always Skype me at Phil_McKinney. And you can also send me an email invite to join your network under LinkedIn. If you send a request both in the Skype and the LinkedIn, just please identify yourself as a podcast listener. Also, don't forget to vote. By the time you get this podcast, it'll be the 1st of May. As regular listeners know, the voting at Podcast Alley starts over, so you can vote once per month. So please go out to Podcast Alley and vote for your favorite podcast. It's the quick and easiest way for you to tell the producers of your favorite podcast that you appreciate all the work and effort they go into putting out some great content. I have 2 upcoming appearances, speeches. These have just recently got onto my schedule. Both of them in the month of May. Yes, I know, I just said that I've got 2 graduations and a wedding. But these 2 speeches appearances are actually the result of my wife. Some people contacted her about having me give a speech back in the Washington, D.C. area. So I will actually be making 2 appearances, one on May 16th and one on May 18th. The May 16th event is for the Virginia High Tech Group, and the May 18th is for Fauquier County, which is actually it's probably it's the furthest county away from Washington, D.C. before you really get out into the mountain areas. They're having a special week for business leaders trying to attract business and also to bring the business community together. So I will be speaking on both May 16th and May 18th on creativity and on innovation. So if you're going to be in Washington, D.C. On those 2 days and you'd like to get more specifics, this is a last-minute thing, and I'm actually still working the logistics. drop me an email at podcast@killerinnovations.com, and I'll reply back with logistics and a link that hopefully you'll be able to use to get registered to attend the event. So again, May 16th, May 18th, 2006, be my next two appearances. So let's go ahead and move on to this week's content, segment 1. Segment 1 is what I'm calling personal barriers to creativity. And this was kind of triggered off the fact that, I don't know how many listeners realize it, but this last week was TV turn-off week. This was the week that organizations were asking you to turn off your television set and instead spend time with your family, spend time reading books, or just spend time doing other things that you've been putting off. And I sat back and thought about this, and I come to realize that TV and other things tend to, get in the way, and actually we use them as excuses for not getting the things done that we really do want to get done, particularly when it's trying to fulfill our dreams. I mean, how many of us have gone off and, bought that treadmill, but it's now gathering dust, or in some people's houses it turns into being the extension of the closet with draped clothes all over it. How many of you quit a diet, a gym membership? Are you a writer who doesn't write? Are you a painter who doesn't paint? Are you an entrepreneur who never starts a new venture? Or are you an inventor who doesn't invent? If you can answer yes to any of those, then you've fallen into the same trap that all of us have fallen into, which is basically resistance. And resistance is probably the most toxic force on the planet. It really is the root for unhappiness. It's had probably the biggest impact on people's ability to be successful. Resistance is harder to kick than drugs. We get so used to putting things off, resisting the urge to go off and do really what our dream is. We've all been hit with it. It's that realization that allows you to put off doing what we should. You can always come up with the excuse. I'll start it tomorrow. I'll write that book once the kids are grown. Actually, that's been my excuse. And now that my kids are all graduating, my excuse is going away. And you have to look into your own heart. Unless you're dead and you still have that small voice, we all have that little urging inside of us to go do the dream, whether it's to go invent, or if you've got the idea and you're putting off going off and starting that company. Now, one of the biggest pleasures I get out of this podcast is the emails that I get from listeners. And I've received a number of emails from listeners where they've taken their ideas and they've actually gone off and started businesses. They've actually gone off and taken their idea with a little bit of urging, both from other listeners, from feedback on the KI community site that people have gotten on their ideas, and have gone off and actually are going to fulfill that dream. They're actually going to go build that next killer product. We all have that voice, we all have that urging, but in many cases I find that as we get older, it just becomes easier and easier to ignore it. The fact of the matter is that we all suffer from this urge to put it off. But the reality is even though you've listened to that voice, and unless you're unique, you're no closer to taking action on it than you were yesterday or you'll be tomorrow. You think resistance isn't real? Well, guess what? We've all been living it. We've all been trying to figure out how to kind of kick the habit, avoid that negative resistance, and actually go out and do something. In fact, do you really think that's resistance or this fear or whatever it is that's holding you back is unique? You think other successful people have gotten over it? You look at successful people in the industry and you think, they had the guts to go off and do it. Well, guess what? It is something that never goes away. In fact, Henry Fonda was still throwing up before every stage performance, even when he was in 75 years old. So think about it. Here's a guy, hugely successful film actor, going out and doing his art, doing his creativity, But he got so nervous, and the urge not to go forward with it was so bad that he actually threw up before every stage performance. But he fought through it, and he still went out there. What really fuels this resistance to go off and do the right thing? Well, fear. Fear is the number one reason. Fear of failure, fear of doubt, fear of criticism, fear of losing your job, fear of losing your income. Whatever it is, the fear of, it is rooted in this whole issue of fear. And the key here is you've got to master the fear and you'll conquer the resistance. And the fact is that you quickly have to figure out that your imagined impact of running into a problem is usually 10 times worse than whatever you'll ever experience, whether it's losing your job or whether it's going off and starting a new venture and having that venture fail. Well, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? You go get another job. It's that fear of never trying. If you're safer where you're at, then taking that step forward and taking that leap, over that crack to jump to the other side, to go off and do something, you feel that it's safer to stay where you're at. The fact of the matter is it's not just you. Others can increase your fear factor or the level of resistance. Others who wish they could do what their little voice is telling them, what their dream is. They see you starting to do that dream. And then other people kind of jump on and say, that's a bad idea. They start bringing up all the negatives. Well, have you thought about how you're going to make your mortgage payment? Have you thought about how you're going to pay for your kids' college? And the fact is that in their lives, they have no desire to change. They've become very comfortable in succumbing themselves to the resistance of doing anything new and creative, that they're just going to sit there. So be careful of others because they can increase your level of fear. You need to be ruthless. Procrastination is really the most common manifestation of resistance. Other manifestations of resistance are things such as health. Doctors in many cases use, or we'll talk about the fact that out of sheer fear, you can have literally a physical manifestation in your health. Henry Fonda throwing up, other people migraines, whatever. But the most common fact or most common manifestation of this resistance, this holding back, not wanting to go do anything new, kind of stay in your comfort zone, is procrastination. And it's the easiest to rationalize. And why is it easy to rationalize? Well, we would never say to ourselves, I'm never going to write that book. That's not something we would tell ourselves if we always had that dream of writing, the great American novel. We would never say, I'm never going to write the book. Instead, what we would say to ourselves is, I'll write the book when I retire, when the kids get out of school, whatever the case might be. But the reality is, you never do it. Procrastination is habit forming. We'll just continue to put things off until our deathbed. At that point, it's too late. What does the end result of procrastinating? What are some of the symptoms that you would feel or see? Well, one is that you're bored, you're restless. You know that there's something that you should be doing, but it's easier to sit on the couch with the remote control in your hand. There's guilt, because you know that you could potentially do something more with your life, that you could apply creative skills to come up with new ideas, new businesses, new products, solve a social need, whatever. You're unmotivated. You've gotten so used to procrastinating that any new thing that comes on your list, you just put that on the pile for procrastination. And the reality is you feel like that life is turning into a chore. You've lost that passion to go off and do something. Now, in reality, if you're listening to this podcast, you may not fall into that category because you've already done something. You've gone out, you've searched, you're looking for content, you're looking for material to help spark that flame inside of you to take your idea or to come up with an idea and go do something, whether it's to write a book, come up with a new product or technology, solve whatever problem that is before you or before society. You're already listening to this podcast. You've already taken that step out. But procrastination is one of those things that will continue to come back over and over and over again, and you have to be on your guard. So how do you change? If you find yourself falling into this procrastination, how do you change? First off, do something. Don't just sit there. If you want to be a writer, write. If you want to be a painter, paint. If you want to be an architect, design. If you want to be an inventor, invent. Whatever it is, do something and do it now. Don't put it off because you're just procrastinating again. Life is a challenge. I mean, we all want to go off. We all have the great American dream as we get older, and the burdens of living, paying bills and paying the doctors, whatever, tends to weigh on us. It's easy to fall into this trap, but you got to at least take that early step. So, like an exercise, if you stick with a routine for 30 days, it turns into a habit. So just don't go off and do it today. We're going to start off on an exercise program, a creativity exercise program for the next 30 days. So, this exercise plan is to exercise your mind and to fulfill your inner voice. So, for the next 30 days, we're going to break this down into weeks. So, we're starting off 1 to 2 times a week, building yourself up to 3 days a week, depending on what your habits have been and how long you've have been procrastinating and need a little bit of warm-up cycle here. I want you to spend 30 minutes doing some kind of mental puzzles. Now, they've actually found that mental puzzles are actually a great preventative medicine to Alzheimer's. Now, these mental puzzles can be anything from crossword puzzles to these new Japanese numeric, I don't even know how to pronounce it, Sudoku puzzles, which I actually like to do, and I usually carry 2 or 3 of those books in my bags when I'm flying on long distances to work on. Whatever the case might be, but it's 30 minutes a day, starting off once to twice a week, working yourself up to 3 days a week. Some cases you can take up to 5 days a week. There's no limit. It's not like you're going to strain a muscle here. We're talking about your brain. But the key here is that by exercising and stimulating the brain, you literally are exercising that muscle, and you need to exercise it just as you would go to the gym and walk on the treadmill. In addition to that, twice per week, hold a personal 30-minute brainstorming session on whatever your dream or vision is. So if your vision is to write a book, if your vision is to invent, if your vision is to be a painter, hold a personal 30-minute brainstorming session twice a week. Now, this isn't just sitting down with a sheet of paper and cranking out ideas. I want you to prepare. Now, go back and listen to the earlier podcast. What do we mean by prepare? Research. If you're talking about, let's say you want to be an inventor, and you want to be an inventor in consumer products, and it wants to be consumer electronics products, you better be out there seeing what that market is. You need to prepare. You need to understand what it is. If you're going to paint or if you're going to write a book, you need to prepare. You need to look at what other books are in the subject matter that you want to write about. Set yourself the idea quota. Now, the key here is start off with maybe a little bit of a lower quota. So for 30 minutes, maybe you set yourself a quota somewhere in the kind of in the 40 range. Once you get exercised and you've loosened up and you've done this for 30 days, for a 30-minute brainstorming session, you should be able to do something in the neighborhood of 75, 100, 110 kind of idea quota in a 30-minute period. Document all of your ideas. Prioritize them. We've talked about that in one of the really early podcasts about how you do prioritization. And then follow through. Now, in the case of corporate enterprises, when I run Killer Innovations workshops, I actually get the executives to set aside $100,000, $200,000 to actually fund the prototype work for the ideas that come out of the brainstorming sessions. If you're doing this on your own, you obviously may or may not have those kinds of funds. But here's what you do. Do set aside a little bit of money. Put together a fund that you contribute to every week, every month, that actually is going to fund your dream. So that you know that when you come up with these ideas, when you run through these personal brainstorming sessions, that you actually are going to have some funds or some means to go off and actually execute it. It's also a way to reward yourself. You can't spend the money until you walk through the process and you generate the ideas. Next, and here's probably one of the more critical things, tell a friend. Tell a friend what you're going to do. Tell a friend what you're committing to do. Invite them to track your progress. Invite them to keep you honest. Very easy for us to tell us in our mind that we're going to go do this and then never go do it. In this case, go tell a friend, go tell a coworker, tell a spouse. And then also be open to discuss the struggles. When you talk to this person, and be accountable to this person, tell them, hey, I'm just really tired today. I really didn't, do what I needed to get done. Tell them and let them help keep you accountable. Because when you tell somebody, that's putting you on notice that you're going to execute, you're going to follow through. And you can be successful at this. You can be successful. You can dust off the cobwebs. You can go through the mental exercises. You can do the personal brainstorming sessions. But the key is you can be successful, but you got to follow through. And if you can be the one that overcomes the procrastination and actually do something, you can be an inspiration to your family and to your friends. As the saying goes, the graveyard is the largest home of ideas, ones that were dreamed up but never executed. Moving on to segment 2, keeping up on the reading. As many of you know, I'm a absolutely ferocious reader. But I was wondering, do you have the same stacks of books and magazines and manuals? And my RSS news reader is getting overloaded, and the blogs I read, everything, all this waiting to be read. I just have this piled up all over the place. And I know I can't keep up. And it's really being amplified by the relocation to California. So I have to actually go through all of my stuff in my house in Virginia, clean it all up, and process the move. So literally every weekend that I'm in Virginia, my wife has me sitting in a chair, literally sorting books and magazines to figure out which ones I'm going to bring. And as I sat there over the last couple times I was back in Virginia thinking about this, I've said I've got to come up with a better way to get through and keep up on the reading material and at the same time not miss critical or important information. So here are some tricks that I've been putting in place over the last 30 days to try to help myself keep up with all my reading. One is find the best aggregators, the best blogs. I've really gone away from trying to print and move clearly towards fully electronic. Now, I'm still a magazine nut, but I'm also dropping some of the more common magazines and going just to the blogs or best news aggregators. 2, get summaries. Now, this is kind of interesting. Someone turned me on to a site called getabstract.com. And getabstract.com does 5 to 10 page summaries of all of the major popular books. Now, this site is not free. I think a gold membership is something like $300 a year, so it is expensive. It is not cheap. But they have literally, so rather than you're reading the entire book, they summarize it so that you can pull out of a 300-page book that's going to take you, a month to read here and there, try to get through the book. You literally can get it into a 10-page summary. And now they actually produce podcasts on the summary. So you don't have to even read them. You can download the podcasts of all the big hit management books that are out there, and then you can literally be up to speed on the fundamental ideas that are in a book. And then if one book particularly catches you, then you can go buy that book and read it out. So I haven't found any other sites that are out there like getabstract.com. If you know one, send it to me, but I'm finding this to be extremely useful. The other one is cut the redundancy. How many news magazines do you need to read? Pick one. Unsubscribe to as many book or magazines, newspapers as possible. Find the core set that you really read, the ones that you know that you're going to read cover to cover every month. Get rid of the rest. Pick the categories for a balanced perspective. Now, a lot of us, and me included, we've just kind of picked up the collection of reading materials without any really planning. So in the case of, depending on how you're applying the creativity and innovation topics of the podcast, think about your reading material to align it with the categories so that you get a balanced perspective. Once you come up with that list, then include categories from outside your main field of interest. You need to be able to expand it, but keep it under control. Otherwise, you get right back into the same problem of having too much material. And be realistic. Be realistic about what you can actually get through and what it is you can actually read. And lastly, figure out how to group your reading into prioritizations. And the prioritizations that I'm using are 1, need to know. So materials, books, newsletters, analyst reports, things in my particular field of interest that I need to do my job. So it's a need to know. Secondly is a should to know. Particularly given the quick changes. I'm in the high-tech field, the quick changes that happen. There are things that I should know given my roles and responsibilities. Third is nice to know. Maybe a little benefit, maybe it helps you spark an idea because you can connect the dots, but it's a nice to know. Next is what I would call kind of the edge case. Could be something you need to know, could be something you don't need to know, but it's right there in the edge. And then lastly is the useless piece of information. Now, me personally, I don't read a lot of things like the gossip magazines and tabloid newspapers, etc. A lot of people do. I don't know how much of that information is useful, but given the short amount of time that I have with trying to balance, my work life, my family, the relocation, my daughter's wedding, kids graduating from college, relocating, etc., I don't have the time for the useless. So if it falls under my useless category, it's jettisoned, it's gone, it's off the list. So again, reading, taking in information is critical for your creativity and innovation. And you need to feel like you're keeping up on the reading, but at the same time, you don't want to get overwhelmed. Because what happens? Then it becomes easy to procrastinate. Right back to the topic that we talked about in segment 1. You need to keep up on the reading in order to use that information to spark ideas. But you need to be smart about it. So again, find the best aggregators. Figure out a way to get summaries. You don't need to read the entire book. Figure out a way to get to the summaries. Cut the redundancy out of your reading. Unsubscribe to anything that is not useful to you. Group your readings into categories for a balanced perspective. So pre-think about what materials you should read. Make sure to include categories that are outside your main field of interest, and you may want to rotate those every quarter or so just to get a different perspective. Be realistic about what you can read and prioritize your reading to make sure that you're getting through the material that's absolutely necessary for you to be successful. Segment 3, moving on to the killer question of the week. What I find when I'm working with individuals, when we're designing a new product, coming up with a new product concept, is that people, particularly outsiders, are eternal optimists. They're always looking for the positive. And even when we're asking for feedback on our ideas, they always talk about the positive portion of whatever you show them. But a lot can be learned by asking the uncomfortable questions. So after presenting your ideas, in this case, for this week's killer question is, what do you hate about this idea, this product, or this service? What do you hate about this idea, this product, or this service? So why is this question important? Well, it gives the person permission to provide honest feedback. Otherwise, you run the risk of getting feedback based on what they think you want to hear. You're showing them a new product, you're showing a new concept, you're talking to somebody in a restaurant, you're presenting your idea, you show them a model, whatever it is, and you ask them, so what did you think? You tend to get the positive. So ask the uncomfortable question, because then otherwise you run the risk of just getting kind of the soft feedbacks, giving you feedback based on what it is you want to hear. So if you ask them the hard, uncomfortable question, you're giving them permission to be open and honest. And then the key is to take that feedback and brainstorm how to convert those negatives into positives. So again, this week's killer question is, what do you hate about this idea, this product, or this service? And then ask yourself, how do you turn that negative into a positive? And with that, thanks for listening. We're coming up right on 30 minutes. Please keep sending in your feedback, suggestions, and links to other innovation sites. You, the listener, as your fellow, what I would call innovation geeks, right along with me, I found the links that you've sent to me to be very useful. And so therefore, I'm actually going to work to try to aggregate up all these links that people have sent me, book recommendations, and etc., and try to publish them. But I would encourage you as listeners to go out to the KI community site. You can get there by going to killerinnovations.com. Look for the, I think it's red and white buttons on the right-hand side that will say KI Community. You click on the KI Community site, and it will take you to the bulletin board. There you can log in, you can interact with other listeners. And one of the listeners, Chris Wooder, and I were talking, we're actually going to create a book section in the KI Community site in order for people to put up books and etc. and to actually have discussions about very specific books. So I would encourage you, if you have links, you have books that you're reading that you think others would be interested to, go to the KI Community site. With that, stay subscribed, get others to subscribe, and join us for show number 54. Bye-bye.